Hi, fifth graders. We're going to continue learning about the Haggadah, but I'm going to make a couple of changes today because I looked at how things went with the Kahoot challenge, and it looked to me that perhaps there was too much information, or perhaps I spoke too quickly. There were some of you that grasped a lot of the new information I shared, but I saw a lot of you really didn't get what I thought you were going to get from it. So I'm going to go a little more slowly today. I'm going to keep things a little bit more basic and see what we get done. So right now, I'm going to take over from where we left off yesterday. We started yesterday at the very beginning of the Seder, and we got partway into the longest section of the Seder, which is called Magid, which comes from the same word as lehagid, to tell. And it is where we get the name of the book that we use at the Passover Seder, the Haggadah. So it's all about telling this story of leaving Egypt. And we talked first about the part called halachma anya, that was in Aramaic, where we say this is the bread of affliction, and then we invite hungry people in to eat. We also looked at the 4 questions. We talked about Avadim Hayinu and the 4 sons. So still in Magid is plenty to come. So we're going to start here with the 10 plagues. Aseret Hamakot. And probably a lot of you have learned this before. We have Dam, Tzfardeya, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shchin, Barad, Arbe, Choshech, and Makat Bechorot. As a matter of fact, we've talked about them some during the Parsha, back when we were reading from Sefer Shmot. So this is familiar to you. What I want to go over is the fact that when we read these plagues at the Seder, our tradition is to take 1 drop out of our wine cup for each plague. So there are many different ways I've heard it explained. But I think in order to understand it best, we have to stop first and think, what is wine a symbol of in the Jewish religion? And what we learn is that wine is a symbol of joy and happiness. So when we take a drop of wine out of our cup, it's not to represent the blood. People have told me that. No, it's not about that. It's really about acknowledging that when these 10 plagues happened, it caused a lot of pain to people. And we don't want to be insensitive to that. So as much as we are joyful about our being free, at the same time, we diminish our joy. We take away a little bit of that wine that stands for joy. We take a little bit out for each plague. So you'll see some people use their finger. Oftentimes I see people use their little pinky finger. You'll see people use the end of their spoon or fork, and they say, dam, dip it in the wine, and then they put a little drop of the wine or grape juice on their plate or on a napkin so that we are bringing our level of joy down a little bit in recognition of all of the suffering. So after we read them all, we take out 3 more drops and we say these words: Ditzach, Adash, Be'achav. Now, these words are not meant to mean anything. You might notice that in the middle of each word, those aren't yuds, those are chupchukim, those are thingamaboppers. They are just there to tell you that these aren't real words. They're made up words that come from the letters of the plagues. So if you look at the first plague, Dam, it starts with Daled, and that's the Daled in Tzach. The second plague was Svardea. That's the Tzadi in the word. And then we go to Kinim, and there it is, although it turns into a final Chaf at the end of Tzach. Adash continues with the Ayin from Arov, the Daled from Dever, and the Shin from Shchin, Adash. Then we take the last 4 plagues, where we have Barad, we have the Aleph in Arba, we have the Chet from Choshech, and the Bet doesn't come from Makat Bechorot, it just comes from Bechorot. So we have these 3 made-up words, and for each one, we take out another drop. So what this is here is what we call a mnemonic device. A mnemonic device is a way to remember a lot of material when you don't have it written down in a book by using some sort of a trick. So the rabbis came up with this trick because back for many hundreds of years, when people had Passover Seders, it was before the printing press, and people did not have access to a printed Seder. Their Seders were shorter, but there were parts of it that they could do completely from memory. But they were helped by sometimes mnemonic devices like this that helped them to remember the order of the plagues. After we're done with the plagues, we get to Dayenu. Dayenu, I always thought when I was a kid that Dayenu was just a really fun song to sing. And one of my mom's best friends was Diana, and we would just sing, instead of Dayenu, we would sing Diana, 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 Diana. We had so much fun. However, what I've since learned is that Dayenu is much more than that. And you probably knew on some level that it would be more than that. But you know that Dayenu goes through saying about God, if you had only done this for us and nothing more, that would have been enough. If you had given us the Torah, but hadn't given us Shabbat, if you'd taken us out of Mitzrayim, but you hadn't drowned the Egyptians when they were chasing us, if you had taken us to the desert, but you hadn't given man and taken care of us, that at every step we stop and say, Dayenu, it would have been enough. So, to me, Dayenu is taking a huge goal. The goal that Bnei Yisrael had was to leave Egypt and slavery and get to Israel, where we would have our own country and be free. Dayenu goes through all the little steps that came on the way through all of that. And it takes apart the big goal and gives us an opportunity to look at each piece of it and be grateful for each piece. Oftentimes I hear people at the Seder say, why would that have been enough? I mean, if God had taken us out of Egypt and not drowned the Egyptians, and they'd come through on the other side, would that really have been enough? If God had taken us into the desert and not given us man to eat, would that really have been enough? And I think we can all agree it wouldn't have. So it's really not about that. It's about gratitude for the little steps that add up to the big whole. So it might not have been enough to have kept us alive to stop, but still, each step along the way is enough that we should stop and be grateful. So that's my take on Dayenu, and I'm interested to know what you think about it. We move on from there to talk about the 3 main symbols of Pesach. So back in the first Seder, which was before Bnei Yisrael left Egypt, the very night before they were going to leave Egypt, They sat down and they quickly had a meal. There were only 3 things that were part of this Seder. They were that they ate the Pesach sacrifice, which was a lamb. They ate matzah, and they ate it with maror. That is what we call Pesach Mitzrayim, the way the very first Pesach was celebrated. Our Pesach today is different. We don't have a Pesach sacrifice, but we have the lamb bone or the shank bone. Some vegetarians instead put a beet on their plate. We have something there to remind us of the 3 things that were commanded to us at the first Pesach. Everything developed after that. And so because of this, because these were part of the commandments, when we eat the matzah, it is a mitzvah to eat the matzah. It's not just that we're going to say the bracha because we always say a bracha before eating. You'll see if we get to that point that we're going to say 2 brachot. We are going to say the bracha for the mitzvah of eating matzah. And that's going to be Vitzivanu, it starts like a regular bracha, Asher Kitchanu b'mitzvotav Vitzivanu al achilat matzah, that we're making a bracha for the mitzvah of eating matzah, and we also make the hamotzi. The same is true of maror, although we don't say hamotzi for maror, but we say a bracha for the mitzvah of eating maror. Those 3 things are the mitzvot, the only foods that we're eating that are really a mitzvah to eat while we're there. We'll dip the parsley. It's a beautiful part of the ceremony. You'll eat haroset, which we don't say a bracha for at all. I'll talk about that later if we get far enough. But these are the things that are mitzvot. We then go to this phrase, B'chol dor vador, in every generation. Chayav Adam, a person is required, lirot et atzmo, to see himself, ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim, as if he went out of Egypt. You know, I know, we weren't there. It was a long time ago. We were not alive. But we are told that we are required to try to put ourselves in the place of our ancestors. You might have noticed that when I talk about leaving Egypt, I often, without even thinking about it, I say when we were slaves in Egypt. I say when we left Egypt. That's one of the ways that I try to see myself as if I left. We have a lot of ways in the Seder that we try to put ourselves in their place. We eat the maror. We eat something bitter to remind us how bitter their lives were. We eat matzah that they ate. We dip our parsley in the salt water to remind us of their tears. We learn and study things from Sefer Shmot so that we better understand their lives. So those are all ways that we are trying to fulfill this requirement, that we empathize and try to sympathize with those members of our people that were truly actually physically there and left Egypt. So after we've gone through all of this, talking about all the wonderful pieces and parts that we're thinking about that led up to us leaving Egypt, something very unusual happens. We start singing Hallel. Now, I don't know if you have ever noticed this. Let me go back in my slides to where we have here. Here is the order. And we're here at the end of the first row in Magid. There is a section of the Seder called Hallel, but look at the bottom row. It's right at the end. So why, in the middle of Magid, do we start singing Hallel? We sing the first part of Hallel during Magid, not in Hallel. When we get to the end, we'll finish the rest of Hallel. But why is it that at the very end of telling this story, we start singing Hallel? Well, the answer to that is after we've talked about all that God has done to bring us out, after we've said Dayenu and talked about all those little steps that led up to us coming eventually to Israel and having our own country, it's time for us to express gratitude. Hallel is also more than just a bunch of great songs. Hallel is songs of praise that come from the Tanakh. And this is the time, after we've just gone over everything that God has done for us, that we stop to praise God. Because to not do that would not be very appropriate. It's appropriate after we've just listed all these things that God has done for us to stop and say thank you. And that's what Hallel is all about. It's all about us stopping and praising God and showing gratitude. So we start it here. Then we'll leave the rest of it for later. But we do the first part of Hallel during Magid. And that's where I'm going to stop because that is the end of Hallel. That is the end of what I want you to learn for today. Instead of doing a Kahoot challenge to see what you've learned, I think what I'm going to do is ask you instead to just write me a list of 3 to 5 things that you learned today. If you didn't learn 3 to 5 things that were brand new, then at least 3 to 5 things that you needed some review on or it was good to go over again. And I'm going to ask you to either share that with me in a Google Doc or to write it out, take a picture, and send it to me. So that way I'll see what you've learned and we'll move forward from there. Have a great day, everybody.